All right, hi guys, hi class. In this video, I'm going to talk about IP addresses. Some of the other materials in class, you might have gotten some information before now about IP addresses. So we just want to go a little bit deeper. We're going to look at, well, let me share my screen and you kind of get a sense of what we want to cover. So give me a second. I'm going to share my entire text up here. Get this out of the way. All right, so first of all, I'm going to pull up this, this notes that I have here, and you might see a few things on the notes. So, so with IP addresses, we're going to look at an example IP address, 192.168.0.0. We're going to look at the subnet mask. What does this really mean? A subnet mask, what does it do? Well, host, we're going to see, what's the host, what's the network, and then just do some more breakdowns here. And then at some point, we're going to talk about subnetting, subnet with subnet mask. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the IP address here. So when you look at an IP address, um, so this is 192.168.0.0. Now, every IP address has a number of hosts and a sort of a host portion and a network portion. When we say host, we're talking about basically computers, right? Individual computers, individual computers, slash devices on the network. That's when we say host. So if there are 10 computers in a small business, then there are 10 hosts. And the network portion of the IP address. So you have the host portion, you have the network portion of that IP address. Okay, so we're going to see here from this, when we look at this example, what part of this IP address is the host portion? That is, when we talk about host and individual computers, how many computers can you have in that IP range, basically? How many computers, right? How many individual computers can you have in the whole IP range? Um, so when you look at a subnet mask, from some examples we're going to do, the subnet mask is going to help us determine how many hosts, right, we can have on the network, right? How many hosts the network can support. Okay. Um, so let's do a few examples, maybe to be clearer to you a little bit. So talking about binary numbers and regular numbers, right? Or binary and decimal. So let me pull up this Excel sheet that I have here. So you notice from here, I broke everything down into segments. So your IP address is good. So I'm going to put this IP address here, 192 168, just to help me be clear on exactly what I'm doing, 0.0. That's my IP address in this box here. I'm just going to give it a slight shade. And then here's my subnet mask. Remember what we said, the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. So what does that mean? Let's just put it here so we can understand. 255.255.255.0. All right. Now, how do we get this 255, right? What does it really mean? You might have heard that every IP address range, you have four octets. So 192.168.0.0. Each of these octets cannot exceed 256, right? 256 is the max. Technically 255, but how do we get 256 to 55, right? So let's do the math. If you add all these numbers, right? So this is a 8-bit 8-bit column, so to speak. 8 bits make 1 byte. So 8 bits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, 8 bits. Now with 8 bits, using the binary system. Remember the binary system? If I'm to go here, for that column, that will be, I don't know if I can do 2 to the power 0 properly here. I'll have to copy and paste from somewhere else, but that'll be 2 to the power 0. This is not exactly how to do it, but 2 to the power 0, right? One second here. So, so the one col the first column here, that's 2 to the power 0. This is 2 to the power 1, 2 to the power 2, 2 to the power 3. So 2 to the power 3 is 8, 2 to the power 4 is 16. And you've seen that in previous class materials that we've had. So 2 to the power 0 is 1, 2 to the power 2, 2 to the power 3, 2 to the power 4 is 8, 2 to the power 5, 16, 2 to the power 6, 32, 2 to the power 7, and 2 to the power 8 is 128. Now, if you add all this, I'm going to pull up my calculator here. Probably pretty easy to add them up. 128 plus 64 plus 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, right? 255. So we can say that all the bits here, all added together, give you 255, all right? Now, when you look at an IP address, um, technically speaking, let me just put a note here. The first number is reserved, right? The first number is reserved. Reserved. All right, the first number is reserved. Um, so we don't use the first number in the IP range. All right, we don't use the first number in the IP range. So the first number is reserved, and like when you go down here, yeah, this is probably going to help us better. So the first number in the IP range is your network IP, right? The last number is your broadcast address, network address, or network IP or network address, right? The first number, network address. The last number is your broadcast address when you want to send messages to all the computers in that network. Your first number is your gateway, so the IP address of your router. And then so every number in between that, every number in the middle of that, right, is usable, right, by all the different hosts in that network, right? So this is basically how we get this 255 number here, right? The first number again is your network address, and the last number is your broadcast address. Okay, so moving along here. Um, so just to clarify again, like we said, your IP address is well, technically, it's not it's 256, right? Because with in the IP address range, you start to count from 0. It's 0 all the way to 255. So technically speaking, you don't have, it's not 255. It is 0 to 255, right? Which makes it 256 numbers, right? But the first number, so let me just bring this down here. The first number is reserved for your network address, basically your router. The last number is your last number, also reserved. That is the broadcast address. Last number is reserved. Um, Last number is reserved. And then you have the first host and the last host, right? So we're going to see how we determine all through, all these four numbers based on an IP address. All right. All right. So let's keep going here. So, so again, we want to look at the IP address, see how the subnet mask works, right? And how we can use this combination of IP address and subnet mask to determine what is the network address. That is the first number, which is reserved, which is basically the router's address. Then the first host, the first usable host or the first usable address. Yeah, some of these terms sometimes can sound like, what does that mean? So when we say host, we're talking about address of the device, right? The IP address of the particular device. Okay, so let's go back here. And so we have 192.168.0.0. All right. So obviously, when you're doing your math, trying to convert binary to numbers and everything. So 192 minus 168, right? I'm just going to grab this here so we can see what I'm doing. 190, this calculator, 192 minus 128, right? You have 64. So you put a 1 here, and obviously you have 64, which is left. So that just gives us a 1, and every other thing is 0 because you've used up all the numbers. 128 plus 64 is 192. So everything is 0. So that's fine over there. Then you come to the second octet, 164, 164, sorry, 168 minus what, 128. That is 40. So you give a 1 here. 40 cannot go in that spot, so you skip that. The next one, 40 go 32, 32 can go into 40, so that is 1. And that leaves you with obviously a balance of 8. So minus 32, that leaves you with 8. So we got to skip this. That's a 0, this is a 1, and that's a 0, 0, 0. All right, so down here, everything here is 0, 0, 0, 0 because the IP address is 192.168, and the last two octets are 0, 0. So everything here is just basically zeros. All right. So, all right, I think I wrote this down previously. So the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. All right. Okay, so what does that really mean? Um, so basically, the subnet mask tells us that the first three octets are all network, part of the network, right? And the last octet, the 0, is the host portion, right? That's how you read that. 255.255.255, that is maxed out as your network. And the 0 here is your host portion, right? So let's keep going. Now we're going to do something called a process of ANDing. That is how we know what this part here. That's how we know what the actual first number is. The network address or the address of the router. That's how we know what that is. So we're just going to basically do simple math, right? So I'm just gonna kind of give it a shade here just to make a difference. So give it a blue shade. So you just do the math. 1 plus 0, right there is 0. Um, so that's ending. Oh, sorry, I didn't. Well, our work is not complete yet. So just like we converted the IP address here, and we did the ones and zeros conversion. Go do the same thing here. So 255 in here in 128, that is 1. So basically, you're just going to have ones all here, right? Because, well, to be clear, so 255, let's declare this, 255 minus 128 leaves you with 127. So you put a 1 in the first spot. Then you have 64 minus 64. You got 63 left. So So one goes here, all right? And then 32 out of, sorry, where's that calculator? So minus 32, you got 31. So another one goes here. So you're going to find out that it's going to be all ones all through. So we put 32 and then minus 16 is equal to 15. So here you got another one here. And then you take out 8 minus 8. That's 7. So one goes here. And minus 4. That leaves you with 3. So you have a 1 here. And obviously minus 2 leaves you with 1. So it's all ones, 1 here. Same thing here. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. All the way to the end. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So everywhere you see 1, right? Everywhere you see 1 here, right? That is, when you count, that is 24 bits, right? So this is 8, right? Let me shade it yellow. That is 8. Then you keep going. This is another 8. That's 16. Another 8. That is 24. So you're going to say there are 24 bits for the network address, right? 24 bits for the network address. In decimal, right, that's equal to 255, right? So 255 in decimal, in binary, is converted to all ones, 8 ones, right? 255, 8 ones, 255, 8 ones, all right? Um, so in this setup here, and then the last portion is all zeros. So when you see all zeros or you see a number of zeros in the host portion, that tells you that that represents the hosts, right? It represents the host. So right now, you can see that in this very last portion, you have 255 hosts, right? 128 here, 128, 128. So that's two. So 255, basically we have 255 here times 3. So 255 times 3, that is your network portion, and just 255 here on the host portion. So you have 255 hosts. All right. Okay, let's keep going. Now to determine, so if that makes sense so far. Now you notice how this is written here. This is actually referred to as a, I believe that's referred to as a CIDR notation, right? A CIDR notation. So you write 192.168.0.0/24 is the same thing as what we wrote here, where we wrote IP address 192.168.0.0 and then subnet mask 255.255.255.0, right? Basically means the same thing. The CIDR notation is here with a /24. So when you see a /24, it's telling you this is a subnet mask, which is basically equal to having approximately 255 hosts, right? So in the in the network portion, when you have all zeros, that is a complete set of hosts for the whole portion there. So that'll be approximately 255. Well, not 255 hosts. You have Actually, you have 256, right? You remember what we said earlier? You have 256 hosts, but then only two of those addresses are not usable, right? So you have 256. So you have 0, right? 0, and so the first one and the last one, right, are reserved, right? Are reserved. So yeah, so let's keep going. It will get a bit clearer if it's, if you're still a little bit unsure what we're talking about. Let's keep going. All right. So right now, so again, very important to note that your host portion, right, is on the right side. When you look at your address, right, when you look at your full address, a portion of it is going to be host and a portion is going to be the network, right? And we're always trying to determine how many hosts does this network allow, basically. How many hosts does this network allow? So here, so far, we can see that uh, there's 24, it's slash 24. So the network portion is 24 bits, and the host portion is basically 8 bits. All right. So let's try to determine the network address. That is the first address, right? So using this ANDing process here, ANDing, we're going to say, we're just going to do the math. So 1 plus 1 here is 1. The next one, 1 plus 1 is 1. Here, 1 plus 0 is 0. You see that when you do 0 and 1, 0 and 1 here. So if I was to use my Excel to make this easier, then I'll just probably be, minus, then I'll just do, I'll grab this guy, and I just do addition here and add it to this. So, easy to use Excel for that. So I can just drag that here, and Excel will finish the job. In fact, I can just drag it all the way to the end. Probably, let me be sure. Um, well, that didn't exactly work out, right? So I got to fix it here. Yeah, I got to fix it there. So I mean, you don't have to use Excel's formula. Sometimes may not really work for you because this is off. And this doesn't work either, right? So yeah, that didn't work out. Actually, I think maybe my formula was wrong. Let me do it again. Sometimes you want to be sure what you're doing. So I'm gonna say, oh, it should be like multiplication for it to be accurate, right? It should be in this scenario, it should be multiplication. So I'm going to multiply that by that here. And now I think it gives me what I want. If I drag it down here, yep, that's more accurate. So my Excel use was a little bit off there. So if I drag this to the end, it should be pretty accurate. There you go. All right, so this is obviously again 1 plus 1, in this first column here, 1 plus 1, 0. Then every time you have 1 plus 0, it's going to be equal to 0 using this ANDing process. All right. So we have very few ones and a lot of zeros. So when we convert this binary back to decimal, obviously it's going to give us what we have up here, right? So you just say 1 here represents 128. 128 plus 64, that brings you to 192, and that is your first octet number there. Same thing with down here. The first one is 128, and the second one here is 32. So that's back to 168 right here. And here it's all zero, so it's going to be 0 here, and here is 0, it's going to be 0 here. Oh, sorry. All right, I got something going on there. All right, so this is 0. So basically, if we're to come back here, your first address, right? Your network address is I mean the IP we had is actually the network address, right? So network address is going to be exactly that 192.168.0.0. That is the address of your router, right? Or your gateway. That's the address. Now let's look at I think I might have lost something when I typed that. Okay, well, that's fine. So let's say the first address we need. All right. Okay, so what we do in this case here, right, is to get the last address, right, you realize that, again, like we said, /24, right, /24 means that you have 24 bits for your network address, right? And we know that each section here, right, each section here is exactly, it's 256, right? but you got to minus the reserved numbers. All right. So when we go here, same thing applies, right? 256, right? 256, the first number is used up. The last number is also used up. So you have to do like a -1, which is what I put here, like a -1. All right. So if you're to do the math, if this is making some sense to you, the first address is 192.168.0.0. The last address, you have to change this portion here. It's going to be 192 because of the number of hosts that we have, right? We have a complete set of hosts here, which is 256. The first number is used up. The last number is going to be our broadcast address, right? So right here, we're going to do 192.168.0 dot. Now, technically, it should be 256, right? But we're going to minus 1 from the end over there, which brings us to 255. All right. Give me 1 second there. All right, so moving along. So again, to be clear, since we have 0 to 256, right? Or 0 to 255, which gives us 256 numbers. The first number, right, is reserved, and the last number is reserved, which leaves you with 255, right? So, yeah. So right here, this is the first number in that range, 0, and the last number is 256. So we have to minus 1, okay, to get our broadcast address. All right, let me say that again. The first number is reserved and the last number is reserved. All right. So 0 has been taken up. All right. Now remember there are 256 numbers. 0 has been taken up. So if this was 256, technically you have to minus 1, which is what we have here. And so this is going to be correctly 255. All right. So the first address, 192.168.0.0 here, and the last address, right, is 192.168.0.255. All right. Now, the next address, or rather the first actual usable address, is going to be right here, 192.168.0. Can you guess what it is? Yep, 1. And the first address, the best way to just go about that is to say the address after this one, right? The address after this. So all you're changing here is the host. That's what's changing. So the first usable address is going to be 192.168.0.1. And the last usable host address is going to be the address just before the broadcast. Just the one before the last broadcast address. So that's going to be 192.168.0.what? 254. All right. So that is how you arrive when you have a combination of IP address and subnet mask, right? Again, insider notation, CIDR notation, you basically say /24, right? /24, same thing as this subnet mask you have here, 255.255. Basically what it means is each of these 255s, like you see here, right? 255 here corresponds to 8 bits. 255, 8 bits, 255, 8 bits. All right. So that is 24 bits, and that's how you get that /24 that we have here. right? So it's kind of like writing it in short form, right? When you do /24, is you're writing the short form of that, right? So when you see /24, it's almost a very straight math. You know that you have a complete set of hosts, which is, uh, I mean, you have 256 addresses, right, in total, but then you have the usable hosts are going to be 254, right? The usable host to be 254 usable hosts, right? Because the first is for the router and the 56, right? Um, the first is for the router, okay? So going all the way to 56, you just minus one, all right? You minus one and get 255, all right? Um, so yeah, so that's how we arrive at this. Um, I'm going to provide another example to help us sort of understand, what is working here. But again, when you look at this, 0 all the way to 255 gives you 256 addresses, all right? But in terms of usable host, this is what is usable, 1 to 254 in that range, all right? Okay, 1 second, we can work on another example.